Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us today on Newsmakers. Well, it's the time of year when we have spring rains, the changing of the seasons, and sometimes we don't think about what happens when that rain runs down the street into the stormwater system. And joining me today is Mary Ann Phillips, Joplin's recycling coordinator, who's going to tell us about stormwater and some changes and some things we need to be concerned about. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And when we talk about, stormwater discharge, the city of Joplin is very involved in this.
And we always have been, but now we're going to actually put it in a 11-page ordinance.
Okay. So, like I said, a lot of people don't think what happens when it rains and you see all that water running down the street and it goes down to a drain and, well, it's gone.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind. Same as trash. Oh, it goes away.
Right.
I can remember as a kid, my mom would say, oh, don't worry about that. It will wash away. And I think we all thought that.
Right.
But where is away?
And so that's one of the things we're focusing on today. And I know, we'll start off with, we have a picture or a graphic. It talks about, people think about, well, we have sewage treatment, we have stormwaters, how do these all tie together? So if we can look at the graphic that we have that talks about it, we have storm drains and sewer systems. So let's start off with some basics.
Okay. Now this is how it is in Joplin. Other cities can be different. Some of the cities that are close to major rivers, Chicago, Louisville, some of their stormwater and their sanitary sewer goes together.
Oh, okay.
So you can imagine how expensive that is to treat rainwater. Right. Yes, crazy expensive. So in Joplin, it's separate.
Okay.
So the pipes leave your house or leave the factory that has what we flush and what we put down the sink and sewer or wastewater, and it goes through certain pipes and then goes to one of our 2 wastewater treatment plants, and we clean it as best as we can by tons of EPA standards and DNR standards and our own, and then believe it or not, when we're done cleaning that water, we put it back in either Turkey Creek or Shoal Creek.
So it's reused.
And somewhere downstream, it becomes someone else's drinking water or their, where they go fishing or swimming or playing. But then for stormwater, a lot of people don't realize, and I probably didn't either before I had the job, when things go down a storm drain, or some people may call it a storm ditch, there's culverts, there's all types of different conveyances, and a lot of people don't realize that does not go to a filter, it doesn't go to the wastewater plant, it goes into Shoal Creek, Turkey Creek, Center Creek, Silver Creek, in the Joplin area.
As we saw on that graphic, that pipe just pretty much goes a long ways and ends up in a creek somewhere.
Now, some of it may evaporate, some of it may percolate down, but with that, when it rains, the rain takes with it all of the impurities that it comes in contact with on parking lots, on roofs, parking stalls that have motor oil and antifreeze, and the trash, and especially styrofoam cups and straws and cigarette butts and big trash, big tires. We find whole tires in our storm ditches, and so we're trying to teach people that just because you think it goes down the storm drain that it's going away or it's being treated.
Not out of mind. Yeah.
It's not out of mind. It's not being treated. There's not magic elves at the end, catching all the debris. Now, if we see it, and our storm ditch crews will clean it up, or we have volunteers that clean it up, but for the most part, it keeps going. So it'll go eventually into Spring River, Neosho River, Grand Lake of the Cherokees,
downstream from this.
Downstream, and then if it lives and doesn't sink to the bottom, it goes on out the Arkansas River and in Mississippi River, Gulf of Mexico.
So there's a lot of environmental concerns with what's happening.
All from accidentally dropping a styrofoam cup on Main Street in Joplin.
I know at times you hear about stream team cleanups and so forth. A lot of those things that they're picking up from the banks of the streams may have washed in then from this type of runoff.
Oh, absolutely, yes, and parking lots, or from people not closing the lid on their trash can, simple things like that.
Right. So now you're looking at some changes, and there's been rules for years as far as what's been in place, federally and statewide.
Did you know you could not wash your saloon slop out of your saloon onto the sidewalk in Joplin? You can't do that. And you still can't do that. And this ordinance will make sure you can't do that. But we've always had laws on the books, but they never spelled out the word stormwater.
Oh, okay.
Stormwater is sort of a new industry lingo, but we've always had rain.
Right, it's always been running off somewhere.
Yeah, it always had to go somewhere. And so the EPA and the DNR, Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Natural Resources wanted us to have very specific language. So when you have very specific language in your laws, then you're able to go to an industry or a person, say you cannot do that, and here's why, and here's where it's written, and oh yes, and here's the fine.
So there's
If
a
you don't-
consequence for not
yes.
doing it.
Oh,
then,
yes,
and ultimately
absolutely.
fish. So we're looking at these rules, and coming from the federal and the state level, it's not just Joplin then that's being affected. As mentioned, communities everywhere.
Oh yes, many cities and counties have illicit discharge ordinances. We just felt like, you know, what we had on the books was good enough to get us by until we had the time to really address this ordinance like it should be.
So Joplin's been looking at this for a number of years.
Many years.
You know, so it's been a project in the works. So we're
Yes.
talking about the term illicit discharge. It sounds really kind of vague. You know, what is
Yeah.
illicit? You know.
And there again, I don't know that I would know what that meant if I didn't have this job. It's fancy lingo, but it means illicit means sort of illegal or something that shouldn't be there.
Oh, okay.
So if you look at a stream or you look at a storm drain, the only thing you should see going down there is snow melt and rain. That's it. So if you see a styrofoam cup or chemicals or someone poured paint, then that's illicit, meaning it should not be going down there.
So it's not natural, basically.
And discharge also is a very kind of confusing word for the public. It's not like we purposefully discharge rain to the storm drains, but that's
it comes off of our roof into the gutters and
right. But what the EPA and the DNR is saying is Joplin or Carthage or even Jasper County, you built those storm drains, and you built those storm drains to go down
to
you
that
know,
creek, yeah.
to gravity, to go to that creek. And so since it's our conveyance, we have to protect what goes down that conveyance. So that's why they're making it the responsibility of the city to stop illicit discharge.
And of course, you have rural areas, you have incorporated areas like Joplin. There's a lot of different types of situations when you look at this.
Oh yes, if you look at our geography, if you look at the map, you'll still see, you know, pasture land and industry and suburbs and of course downtown.
And even within Joplin, you have different types of systems for stormwater. Some places you have the grate on the street; it goes under the street and you never see it again. Other places we still see the ditches or cuts.
Good point. Downtown, you mostly don't see them because everybody was so worried about flooding. And of course, we can't go back. We can't go back 100 years and say, well, then you shouldn't have built it there. Mother Nature didn't like that.
Build it.
Right. But I used to also say that with civil engineering, we conquered the quantity, because the car was the most important thing, and we didn't want that rainwater interfering with driving. So that was good news. Bad news is we conquered it.
So that paved street has all the water underneath it now.
Right, and so, but we didn't have a conveyance to clean it. But yes, in downtown, a lot of it is underground. You don't see it. Out more towards the edges, it is above ground. Now, some cities, Springfield's done this. They have turned it around, and they have bought land and bought easements and daylighted it. Daylighted the water so that it would be above ground, so that it would have a chance for the sun to get to it and the flora and the fauna to grow in it.
So kind of more natural areas for the water to
more
be
natural,
retained.
yes.
Right. Does this tie into even a development of the city? You have these areas you can't change. You can't change downtown because that's the way it's built, but as new developers put in subdivisions and so forth, is stormwater one of the concerns they look at?
They're supposed to. It's difficult. It really is, because you still have to have parking lots, and you still have to say, well, we can't build that if we have to have so much green space. Yeah, if we have to have so much green space, then our building's going to be smaller, our parking lot's going to be smaller, and it's not economically feasible to even build it. So there's a lot of trade-off, a lot of give and take. There's a lot of compromising, a lot of engineering, and creativity.
Trying to work it out.
Right.
Now, have government standards changed over the years? I mean, as far as you mentioned the EPA and the Department of Natural Resources, are some of these mandates coming from other levels of government that you have to do things differently? Or?
Well, the models that the engineers use have changed through the years, and of course, just the rainfall and what we consider a 5-year,
Right.
plan versus a 100-year, and a lot of those models have changed and the numbers have changed.
So they have to adapt to those new the designs that they're providing
Right.
for you and so forth. Well, let's talk a little bit about what we talk about pollutants. Anything you say that's not really natural. You mentioned the styrofoam cups and so forth. People might be saying, well, I cut my grass and the grass ends up on the street, or the leaves go down the drain in the wintertime or when the fall leaves. I mean, is it natural, man-made? Is there a distinction between that type of thing?
Organic or inorganic can still hurt your streams. So if you pour in a bunch of leaves or grass clippings or even dirt, rock into a natural stream, you're going to get it murky. It's going to get murky and the sun won't be able to get through. And it harms it just as much as if you poured some malathion in there.
So for people who are working with things like maybe they look around their yard, they say, well, I have a sprinkler system, or I have these types of, is that going to affect them? Or, they have that water that's coming up out of the ground and sometimes it runs out in the street.
Oh, okay. Well, and I say only rainwater and snow melt, but there are a lot of exceptions
to the rule, right.
Like when the fire department comes to put your water.
Right, you're going to hose down the house for a fire.
Right. Or if you have a sump pump, the condensation from air conditioners, or even runoff from irrigation, from sprinkler systems. Yeah.
How about people who want to wash their car in the driveway? Are they going to have to worry about the fact that they soap up their car and they hose it down with the hose?
For years, we've been trying to tell people not to do that. We've been trying to tell people do it on the grass, because then the soap will percolate down into the lawn instead of being carried down the street into the closest storm drain. So yeah, soap's not a good thing either, even if it's organic, natural soap, we still don't want it in the storm drains.
So looking at the situations, I know a lot of people also maybe have swimming pools, and the end of the season comes, what do I do with all that water in the pool?
And our illicit discharge addresses this, and there are apartment complexes too, and hotels. It's not just homes, right? And we tell them to, don't put any chemicals in it for a while and let it the chlorine or the salt tablets just dissipate. And once the water has sat for a while, then it's pretty much
so you don't want that
clean.
Chlorine going down the stream.
Right, it's clean. We'd rather them discharge it into their yard, so once again it'll percolate. But your yard might be next door to your
right. It flows downhill sometimes.
Right, your neighbor's yard. So we all have to be creative about that. But we never want a pool full of chlorine to be hosed with the hose going down the drain. That just
You're not going to drain your pool in the fall by saying, we'll just put the hose in here and go out in the street and go down the drain.
Yeah, we will stop you if we see that.
Right. Well, that comes to discuss the ordinance then. What are you actually asking the City Council to look at?
Well, like I said, it's 11 pages. A lot of that is just definitions. And then also it gives the city legal authority to go to someone's property and not trespass and not go under cover of night, but go knock on the door and say, did you know that there's a pipe going from here to here that shouldn't be? Or did you know your sewer line somehow has become disconnected from our sewer line? It's percolating up through the grass, it's going down the street, you need to fix it. So it gives us more power to talk to the property owners and get them to change it. Now, if they refuse, and we've given them several options and several warnings, there are steps that we will be able to take them to court.
Okay, so there's ultimately, you're going to have to do something or you'll end up in court.
Right.
Tying that together. And we're also talking about commercial as well as residential. There's businesses that may have challenges.
Yes, absolutely. In the old days, industries were just like, oh, well, this water's no good, let's just
we finished using this for the product.
We're done with this. It's got heavy metals in it. Oh, well, it'll wash away. And they just put the hose out the parking lot and off it goes. And those days are over. And we do have personnel that go to a lot of industries and look at how they treat their wastewater before it goes down to the sewer system, or make sure it's not accidentally let out into the parking lot.
So they need to meet some standards as an industry to say, this is part of our process of manufacturing or whatever they're doing. You have to, what are you doing with that water when you're finished with it, or those products, and tying that together. So you have these types of situations. You mentioned sometimes sewer lines breaking. Do you have problems where people maybe illegally hook up to storm drain systems to dump things?
Oh, sure. There was a case where it was an apartment house and their sewer was all plugged up, so they just got a pump and took the hose out the basement window and down into the storm drain. Yeah, and it was disgusting.
But the neighbors enjoyed that
So
too,
we
right?
smelled it, actually. But yeah, unfortunately, things like that happen. But a lot of people don't know you shouldn't do that. Some people think, oh, that's the right thing to do.
Right. So part of what you're working on is educating people.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So, it's not just we have these new rules. It's, did you know you shouldn't be doing this? Or did you know there's an alternative to doing this? And so forth. Now here, I know I've read in the past, perhaps like agricultural fertilizing and so forth, in the rural areas worried about the fertilizer running off into streams. What about people in town maybe that have the chemicals sprayed on their yard in spring and the summer to kill weeds and stuff like that? Are those concerns as well?
Well, it's a concern. We try to teach people don't do it right before a rain. Yeah, and I know it's hard to predict, but you've got to let it have a chance to do its job, to cling to the leaves or whatever it's going to do. But if you put too much down and it doesn't have time to absorb and it rains, yes, it's going to go down into the storm drains. So we try to educate people
along those lines.
Yeah, just best management practices.
Now I know in the fall we have the leaf collection system, and I can always remember you saying, rake your leaves to the curb but not into the street. Is that one of the reasons you don't want those leaves washing down the street into the drains?
Right. But besides it just clogs it up and can create flooding. Once those leaves do get dislodged and go on down, we don't want them in the creek because then it makes the water murky.
Now, do you have a system now where if people see a problem, maybe with a drain in their neighborhood or maybe one of those open ditches, they can call the city and say, hey, our street's flooding and I think it's because that stormwater drain's not working correctly?
Oh, sure. People call all the time, and unfortunately they're going to get whoever answers the phone or whichever extension
Which
they
department
call.
do I call? Yeah.
Right. They may call the street department, they may call the sewer department or code enforcement or me, fire department even. You just, but most city staff is trained. Those calls come in, they know what to do.
They know how to handle that. So that's an ongoing job for the cities to check those areas to make sure they're working and so forth. So you're talking about monitoring. Tell me about the staffing or the monitoring of being able to follow up with this. Joplin's a lot of square footage for somebody in miles to go around and check homes. And
well, it is going to be hard because this ordinance does not give us new staff. So we're still going to be operating with the same staff
number of people, right?
That we've always had. So we're going to rely on the public to say, oh, there's a funny odor here, or I'm seeing a funny sheen, or there's paint. Someone just dumped paint or motor oil, and so we're relying on the public. We do have. A couple years ago, we hired a new employee in the sewer department, and he goes out and looks at manufacturing companies and industries and make sure they're doing things correctly. But that was a couple years ago.
So it's not going to be, we have this new ordinance, we need to have somebody who's going to be kind of on patrol to drive around the city and look at things.
The DNR would like us to do that, but
they're not giving you the money to do that.
But yeah.
What about, there are accidental spills and things. What should people do if, they accidentally, something discharged they didn't mean to, or, they had a spill at something at home and it went down the street,
Sure. If they just call us, we have the street department or the sewer maintenance or even the fire department will come out, and we have different socks, and wattles and even sawdust, and there's different things that we can put down to stop it. And this happens a lot with spills on I-44.
Right, you see accidents and they're out there.
Sure. And then if it's big enough, then we call in professional companies.
I've noticed more that when people also have construction along the side of a construction site, they seem to have more barriers now to keep water, or I don't know if they're controlling the water with those green structures along the sides of ditches.
It's supposed to. It's supposed to filter the rainwater and let the rainwater through and stop the sediment and the trash. Those things are hard to maintain, but we do have city staff that is assigned to different construction projects, and they are supposed to go out and monitor those and make sure they're working.
And sometimes even when I've seen city street projects underway, you'll see them paving a street and you'll see some barriers along the street.
Sure, our own, yes.
Yeah,
not just what ABC Construction Company is doing, but what the city's doing.
If you're repaving a street or doing some work, there's a little drainage area, so forth along those lines. So the timing for this, we're talking about it in April, probably more in the summer when people are going to actually see this?
Anytime you have a new ordinance or new law, new code, there's a public hearing process. Timeline, and sometimes it has to go to first, second, third reading, and so we don't just immediately, unless it's a safety issue or an emergency, but something like this will probably be hopefully the end of summer, it will be officially on the books.
Right. So once it's on the books, you'll have a procedure that people will follow as far as if there's a problem, steps that will be taken, notification and so forth.
And we're notifying different stakeholders already. The Missouri Stream Team is very interested in this, the master naturalists, the master gardeners, a lot of people who are very concerned about the health of all of our water bodies. And so they're already looking at it. They've had a chance, very short chance to look at paragraph 3, subsection 2A, you know, and all the definitions. And so we'll have a whole army of people now who will be willing to go out there and say, you know what, you can't do that.
So kind of that educational force of getting things out. And of course, we're talking about the city of Joplin. Are other nearby communities doing similar things?
They were all supposed to. They kind of were in the same situation we were. A lot of them had things already on the books. They're just kind of beefing those up. But the big cities, you know, St. Louis, Kansas City, Jeff City, yes, they've had this for many years.
For many years. So if you can fix things in Joplin, it's still going to go downstream. You need to make sure that people upstream, I guess, are doing things so it doesn't come into Joplin.
Oh, sure, sure.
So
yeah, we don't want to get blamed for their
discharge somewhere else.
Their bad management practices.
Right. So, what would you say are the key points that people need to remember? You know, I say I'm a homeowner. What do I need to remember in terms of, I guess, following the rules that are being put into an ordinance form?
One of the simplest things, and I do own my home, and I go outside all the time and pick up trash that's blown around. You know, yeah, it's not my trash, but if it's in my yard, it's my trash now.
Put it in the trash can,
right. And so if homeowners could just go out to the street, and if there's a storm drain next to them, and they see trash that's clogged on it or trash that's headed for it, it's simple. You just pick it up. And put it in your trash can, and you've kind of adopted your little section. And then we also ask people not to put fertilizer, insecticides, and anything down on their lawn too close
to the rainy season.
To a rain, and don't over apply. You know, more is not better.
Right. So pay attention to that forecast.
Right.
Because you're wasting your money if you put it down and you have a downpour the next day anyway. It's not going to be cost efficient for them to do that and tie that together.
And those are just two very basics. Simple things that one, picking up trash doesn't cost any money.
Now, I know the quote old days, people would do their own oil changes and things like that. Do you feel that was more of a problem when people would have that oil dripping and ends up washing in the street, or sometimes even would people even say, okay, I'll just pour this?
I have had people admit to me that's how they got rid of their oil, is they just went to the closest storm drain and poured it down. I've had people admit that to me, or they take it out to their grandpa's farm and put it along the fence row and set it on fire.
So
they used it, used it as an accelerant. Things have got to change. People have to understand that Mother Nature is not going to clean it for us, and we've got to do it.
Right. And of course, you talk about the whole system going from the creeks to the streams to the rivers and on eventually, the whole chain of life throughout everything. And so forth.
And I think also, though, in the old days, we didn't have styrofoam. We didn't have as many plastic cups.
Right.
We had paper straws. We didn't have plastic straws. Probably always had cigarette butts.
Yeah, those are something that are always going to be in the system. And I guess that aspects with styrofoam and plastic straws and so forth, they don't decompose when they do end up in the creek.
They can break up, but they don't go away.
Right.
They may go into little small pieces, which actually is even worse, because then the fish can
think it's food to eat it along those lines.
Right. So it gets in their system even faster.
So if someone who's watching would like some more information, City of Joplin is going to have a kind of an educational campaign or information available through your website. How do you plan to approach that?
Eventually, when all this, becomes law and everything, it will be on the city's website. And then I have brochures already on our website that you can download or just view. Be glad to come speak to schools or civic groups. I even have a model or a diorama, if you will, and it's pretty big and it's interactive. It's got a spray bottle to represent rain. And I loan that to teachers or Boy Scout leaders or educators. It's geared more towards younger people, but it's good for adults too. It's very expensive. It costs us $500 to buy this kit, but I will loan it to to anybody that wants to use it, and because I'm just one person.
So the young people are important to educate as well. The children who
right.
say,
But I need people to help me.
Right, and so the
get the
teachers
word
and the
out.
others who say, the scout leaders, whoever, they're talking about environmental issues, and this is a timely time of year as well. With
Sure,
Earth Day
sure.
coming up, people are concerned.
And Arbor Day.
Arbor Day, so there's a lot of ties into that, the theme of this time of year. Looking forward to things changing. Well, I know you're also very busy with the recycling center. That's still an ongoing operation in Joplin. And
Oh yes, and we add things occasionally. Well, it's been several years ago we added cooking oil, which I don't think people even thought that was possible. But if you have a big turkey fryer, or even you're just frying a pan of bacon, whatever. Animal or vegetable oil, we'll take that.
Okay.
And of course, we've always taken batteries. We take household hazardous waste. We take chemicals. So if you do come across,
The
an
old
old
can
bottle
of
of malathion, do
Mhm.
not smell it, because old stuff will smell really bad. We'll take all that nasty stuff.
Okay. And you still have a limited electronics collection for people who say, I've got this old VCR that's been on the shelf and it doesn't work, and things like that.
It's amazing the old electronics we still get in. Now, more and more we get a lot of flat screen TVs and flat screen monitors.
People have gotten
Those
rid of the big
things,
CRTs.
They got rid of the big CRTs, but now the flat screens, I just don't think they're made to be moved.
Right. They're kind of fragile.
or tipped over by the dog. I don't know, but it's kind of frightening that something you think is new technology,
Right.
but we're getting it into the recycling center already.
But that's something that you could take it to the recycling center, not just take it to the curb.
Right. We will take it.
Great. Well, Marianne, I'd like to thank you very much for providing the information. I know you have a very informative website, and they have information. They can always probably call you as well. Questions.
They can call me, and if I'm not there, leave a message, and I'll call you back.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming today and updating us, and look forward to hearing more about the ordinance and how it goes.
Well, we'll have to come back and
follow up on that and
follow
other
up,
environmental
yes.
concerns. All right, well, thank you. And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on this station. We'll see you then.